Most of us learn our conflict styles from the important and significant people in our lives as we're young, and we watch them and we develop our own styles based on what we see from our parents, for example, or other folks who are important in our lives when we're young. Unfortunately, many of us witness unhealthy communication as we're growing up and as we're developing our own style and our own way of communicating. Probably the single most destructive force in communication and in relationships is passive-aggressive behavior. And divorce is the perfect setting for passive-aggressive behavior between ex-spouses. The circumstances are set up to create an avoidance of communication, an avoidance of dealing with an ex-spouse at all. It's part of the system, because the system is so adversarial. It's part of the nature of divorce in general, because there's so much anger and hostility usually that goes along with divorce. And frankly, if you did not communicate well as a married couple, you probably are not going to communicate well as a divorced couple. In fact, that's probably going to get worse. In fact, there are four major categories that get folks in the door for marital therapy, and those categories tend to be, if someone's sitting down for marital therapy and I ask what brings you in, and we just start with some general statements, usually what I'm going to hear from a couple is that they have poor communication or communication issues, differences in how to handle money or a lack of money, differences in parenting style, total disagreement about how to do that, or sometimes just subtle disagreement. Either way, it can cause problems. And then sexual issues. Now, typically in divorce, the sexual issues go away. The other three areas, however, remain. In fact, if you didn't communicate well as a married couple, you will not communicate well as a divorced couple. If you disagreed about money, you're likely to have disagreements about money as a divorced couple. And if you disagreed about parenting, you're likely to continue to disagree when you're divorced. And in fact, all of those areas tend to get worse. So if we just look at the communication issues and we assume that those issues that we could not resolve as a married couple are going to continue to be there, and new issues are going to come up that we can't resolve because we don't communicate well. If we assume that on the front end, then we can also assume there are going to be some problems in our divorces. Now, these conflict styles that we learn, some of us are aggressive. Aggressive folks tend to walk all over others. That's very unhealthy. Aggressive people tend to be bullies, frankly. If your ex is extremely aggressive and steps on your rights and does not consider your needs or feelings, you're dealing with an aggressive person there. If your ex-spouse does really well at setting limits and boundaries and being very forthcoming and straightforward with you and talks in a healthy manner, takes care of their own needs but not at your expense, then they're probably assertive, and that should be all of our goal. We all need to be assertive and working toward being assertive. So if you're assertive, that means you're taking care of your needs but not at the expense of others. But the single most destructive force in relationships is passive-aggressive behavior. If you learned a passive-aggressive style, if you witnessed it growing up and then you developed that style on your own over time, you have to unlearn it. Passive-aggressive behavior has to be unlearned. You have to avoid passive-aggressiveness, or you will destroy your relationships. Examples of passive-aggressive behavior would be blatantly doing the opposite of what your ex has asked. For example, if your ex-spouse asks you to pick the children up at 5 and you show up at 5:30 and you do that consistently, that's probably passive-aggressive behavior. You're likely attempting to send some message to your ex through your behavior, and it's unhealthy to do that. Another example of passive-aggressive behavior is cold shoulder. Passive-aggressive behavior in marriages, what you often see is that couple who has a disagreement or someone's upset and they don't speak to their spouse for a number of days. That's passive-aggressive behavior. For some folks, it feels very effective because sometimes it gets folks what they want. Usually when it's getting you what you want, it just means that others around you are adapting to your passive-aggressive behavior.